rest of season, you have Lad McConkey and DJ Moore, and I think it's a good question to bring up. Lad McConkey, wide receiver 20 overall, has had his bye already, which is important to note. DJ Moore, wide receiver 25, and has had his bye as well. So both of these guys have had their byes, so their stats aren't skewed for where they are in terms of the total for the season for points scored. But when looking at both of these guys, I mean, Lad is going to operate as the number one. But I mean, why don't you kind of jump in here first and then I can kind of give my side here. But who would you prefer at this point, gun to your head? Which guy are you taking rest of the season?
A lot of it depends on what my team needs because McConkey is a somewhat of a higher floor player, but he popped last game, and it was a great matchup. But he has a lot of nice matchups moving forward. This is a low volume passing team. They want to run the ball, but it does look like Lad McConkey's the guy, despite the low volume. Now, going into yesterday, 91st percentile in team targets. So he's getting 24.4% of team targets. And going into yesterday, he's 93rd. And I'm using the tools, the metrics on rotowire.com in terms of he's being targeted on 28.1% of the routes he is running. So when he's running routes, when they are throwing the ball, Lad McConkey's getting almost a quarter of the targets, which is really, really good news. They have other guys here like Quentin Johnson, Palmer. I think they had Jalen Reed run field. McConkey's the guy in this offense. When it comes to DJ Moore, he's not getting targets, right? Like to start the year, he had 3 straight games with at least 8 targets, and then 2 of those games he had double digits. Since then, he's only had 1 game with 8 targets, and then 3 out of his past 4, 6, 5, and 4, and now the 5 and 4 comes in back-to-back games. He's had a total of 6 receptions for 47 yards in these past 2 games combined. Mind you, on paper, Jacksonville should have been a smash spot. Washington, in theory, should have been a smash spot. Rest of season schedule, there's a lot of smash spots here for DJ Moore. I just think that maybe it's a rapport issue with Caleb Williams. None of these receivers are really going off. We're seeing some games, like if you go back, like Komet's having some good yardage. DeAndre Swift is picking up those chunks which could be inflating the throwing yards for Caleb Williams. But I think I might rather have Lad McConkey because I trust his quarterback more. Lower volume, but it's a more efficient passing attack. And again, DJ Moore has a better schedule, but Lad, Cleveland, which they're 26th, Baltimore 31st, Atlanta 25th, Tampa 28th, New England 20th. So there's some usable spots here. Like if you have DJ Moore, you look at the schedule, you're like, how can I sit this guy? Well, I get it. The schedule looks, how can you sit him? But his recent production tells me, how do you play him?
Yeah, I get it. From a target standpoint, they're really not that far off. I mean, 45 for Lad, 51 for DJ Moore. And right now they're projecting them to both have the same amount of targets on the rest of the season here. 72 for DJ Moore, 69 for Lad. DJ Moore is expected to have 100 more yards, 3 more catches, and 1 more touchdown. I prefer DJ Moore at this juncture of the season. I think both guys should be very good. I think Lad can only get better, so there's that untapped potential. And his schedule is pretty good. I mean, Lad McConkey gets the Tampa Bay Buccaneers in the fantasy, the first week of the fantasy playoffs. He gets Cleveland this week, who, I mean, they've been 26 when it comes to points given up to the wide receiver position. They still get Baltimore, they still get Atlanta, and then they get the Patriots in week 17 of the fantasy playoffs, which is the championship. They do play Denver and they do play Kansas City, and they get Tennessee. Denver would be the semifinals. But DJ Moore, man, I mean, his schedule is just too good to ignore. They're going to figure it out. I feel like, this Washington, this Bears team has taken advantage when they've played bad teams. Like that's kind of been my takeaway. Like when they've played bad teams, they've taken advantage of it. Caleb should get better. It was a bad game, like kind of just one of those where you just throw it out the window. And for DJ Moore, it's tough, right? Like you've had 3 games where he has scored. I mean, he's had 27, 20, and 22 yards. Like that's frustrating. Totally get it. But the upside is just there. I mean, he plays Detroit, he plays Minnesota, he plays Detroit and Minnesota again. He gets Minnesota and Detroit in the first 2 weeks of the fantasy playoffs. Like, I just, to me, I don't think you can go wrong with either guy. But I personally, if somebody if you had Ladd and somebody liked him, I would be totally fine sending him over to the DJ Moore owner and
Yeah.
seeing if they pull the trigger. But I can understand the argument for both sides. I just think like he's not out targeting DJ Moore right now. They're pretty close, and so because of that, give me the guy with the better schedule and just the higher upside. And I also, I mean, he plays he's at Detroit in a dome. He's at Minnesota in a dome. He's in San Francisco, which should be nice weather. Like so, I just prefer DJ Moore. But is there any last thoughts for you there before we move to the
No,
next topic here?
it's close. Like I said, like I think I favor Lad, and usually the
Yeah,
deal breaker for me is the quarterback. And again, he has some nice spots. DJ Moore is probably the smarter play. Like if you need the upside play rest of season, then DJ Moore, you would think in theory he's going to figure it out. Him and Caleb Williams going to figure it out. So
sure.
it just depends on what your team. If you just need that little bit more stability, maybe you go Lad McConkey. If you say like, okay, my team needs some upside, it needs some ceiling, it needs a guy who can go out and put up a 25-point game a few weeks in a row, then I think that's DJ Moore.
Sure.